Welcome to PsychicBent. My name is Carrie.
And I'm Kim. We are two sisters wanting to help other psychics learn and grow in their abilities and to help educate about spirits, angels, and everything psychic.
Welcome back, PsychicBent listeners. We are excited about today's episode. And before we go into that, I hope everybody enjoyed last week's episode. Kim did a great job on that. Were you nervous, Kim, doing it by yourself?
Yes, I was nervous doing it by myself. But I meditated beforehand.
Well, I couldn't tell, but
I followed the steps. I meditated beforehand and did my breathing.
you medicated?
I did meditate and I jumped right into it. So
You didn't catch it. I said, oh, you medicated?
yes, I did that too. That's what I'm saying. Yeah, I did that.
You did that too. You did medication. Okay.
What kind of meds did you take? I meditated, medicated, and did breathing. So I was good to go.
Okay. You're good to go.
Yeah.
Well, it's difficult because it's different when you're recording with someone on the podcast with you because you know someone's listening and someone's there to give input.
Right. They're there to confirm or not dispute, but, give their opinion on everything. And it's just easier to record when you're bouncing your ideas off of somebody else and getting what they think about it. So, but it was fine.
Yes. And so I thought you did a wonderful job. And I just wanted to congratulate you on that. It was a very, very well, nicely done podcast.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. So this episode, we're going to be covering labyrinths. So, and that's hard for me to say because I do have a speech impediment that some words, letters that are back to back trip me up. It'll be and an R together. It does not work well for Carrie. So please forgive me for pronouncing it, for it sounding weird. Being born with a birth defect that, COFLEB, that, made it difficult for some letters. And I tried really hard, but yeah, there's no way the B and the R together. It's like labyrinth. I just kind of like really draw it out to get it to come out. I'm not going to go labyrinth every time I mention it. So there we go. You're going to get the quick labyrinth and move on with it. So it's an exciting episode to go over because first of all, it's a topic that's not very common, I don't think. What do you think, Kim?
Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah, I haven't seen... Well, out of all the podcasts I've listened to, I've only heard it on one. And the research that we did, I think it's not covered as much as what I think it probably should be.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people have never visited one.
Right.
I have been to one. It was really funny. Kim's like, oh my gosh, you're not going to believe it. The small little town that my dad lives in, has one. Yeah. It's like in the middle of nowhere. And she's like, oh my gosh, you're not going to believe it. And I'm like, yeah, I've been there. It's like a couple of years ago I was there. But what's funny is there's different kinds of labyrinths, and Kim's going to get into a little more detail with this. The particular one I visited was just a circle spiraling out. But some of them can be very elaborate, and it's almost like a maze. Didn't you come across that in your research, Kim, that some of them you have to really pay attention to get through?
Yes. Yeah, I found that out. Yeah.
Yeah. So Kim, why don't we jump on in, and why don't you start us off with labyrinths?
Okay. I hope it's okay that I do a little left-brainedness here, but I do think it's important to cover a little bit of the history of labyrinths and how long they've actually been around and what they meant to ancient civilizations as well. These go back... They found them on the walls, ancient walls and such, and caves and everything where they've etched out the sketches on the walls in pictographs and such. So that tells you they've been around for a very, very long time doing these different labyrinths. And in Christianity, labyrinths were used to represent the pilgrimage to the Holy Land because a lot of people couldn't make that journey on their own. So they created these labyrinths to mimic the walking to the Holy Land. They were also found in Jewish societies, Jewish communities for the same type of purpose, and in the center of it for them that's where Christ is. In ancient Greece, the city of Crete had a gigantic labyrinth that was there, and that was for, if you learned anything in Greek history or whatever, the Minotaur, which was a very dangerous creature. He's Super Bull or whatever you want to call him. He was actually drawn into that labyrinth and was stuck there. He couldn't get back out. That is the story of that labyrinth, the famous story. Now, since I've said that this labyrinth caused a minotaur to get lost in there and stuck and couldn't get his way out, that leads me to let you know that there are actually two different categories under the word labyrinth. You have the maze, which is most likely what the Minotaur was stuck in, because the maze has dead ends. It has, you get caught in there, you have to turn around, go back another way, and it's like a giant puzzle, which if you've done puzzle books and such, you know that a maze, you have to find your way to the center or to the end to get out, and it takes forever because there's different detours that you have to take. You have to really think about it. That's the maze. And then there's what's called the labyrinth. Now, the labyrinth is supposed to be an easy, some are lengthy, but just a walking pathway. You can be mindful. It causes you to be mindful, present, to focus on what you're doing, walking with intention. It's a very, what's called a meditative walking is what you're doing. You can become calm, you can get clarity with it, but that's what a labyrinth is. And it's a one way in, and you go through many twists and turns. It could be a very simple one where you just do a few twists and turns to get to the center. And then once you're in the center, that's where you can meditate, reflect, say a prayer, whatever it is that you want to do. And then there's one path to come back out. There's no getting stuck in there and have to turn around and go another way because you've walked into a dead end, or there's obstacles you have to go over or anything. It's just a very simple pathway to get you to the center and then back out. So that's what a labyrinth is.
Yeah, that one's basically you're setting the intention prior to going into the labyrinth, what you want to, what spiritual journey is needed for what you're going to meditate on, or your prayer going into the labyrinth, and there your mindfulness the entire time you're there is just concentrating. Where the other one's teaching you lessons.
Yes.
The maze is showing you how life is. There's twists and turns. You run into dead ends. It's teaching you things that you need to learn spiritually as well, physically. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Right. When we were doing the meditation techniques, I had mentioned about active meditation or my walking meditation that I do. That pointed me to this, to the labyrinth, because that's what you do. You are doing a walking meditation while you are going through the labyrinth, while you're following the pathway there. And it is kind of, I thought of as what a symbolism for actually following, going through the life path, that you start at the beginning. When you're born, you go through this pathway, and some of them are so elaborate where they've got little places that you can sit in. It's like in four corners, so it could be in a shape of a square, but you're walking through this corner, then you sit there and you can meditate on that. And it just depends on what your beliefs are and everything, but it just reminded me of life. You are trying to get to the center to answer your spiritual questions or to get word from spirit, whatever it is that you're looking for in the center, and then you find your way back out, or you follow the path back out. And when you get back to the end, back out, you just feel so, I could see where you could feel so alive, so it's just a circle. It's just, that's what it reminded me of. You're on your path to find the answer to something. And then as you're coming back out, it's reaffirming the answer that you were given. And then you're out with your answer. What are your thoughts on that?
Oh, I agree. Because with meditative walking or setting the intention prior to getting into the labyrinth, you're quiet your thought, your anxiety goes, you lower your stress. It's showing you the path. And I agree that it's definitely your spiritual path and your growth, when you're first starting out, that spiral or however it is shaped, you're way out there.
Mm-hmm.
But as you're going through the labyrinth and you're making your way, you're getting closer to that goal, closer to your, whether it's trying to develop your psychic abilities, whether you're trying to connect with your higher self. It's a great way of just basically helping you on your spiritual path.
Right.
And you're probably going to go into this, but sacred geometry shows patterns and shapes that connect everything in the universe. Well, when you explore a labyrinth, you can see how a mandala mirrors these patterns, and they could fit together very smoothly.
Mm-hmm.
Symbols, circles, and triangles all stand for spiritual growth, and that's what the labyrinths are. It's all those shapes.
Right. I read that also a lot of the labyrinths, when they are built, when they're constructed, the center is always in the shape of a flower. It's usually in the shape of the flower, and that is also the sacred geometry has the flower of life in the center of it, and that's what they put in the center of labyrinths.
Well, when a labyrinth's it's man-made. It's not a naturally occurring
Right.
thing. But when it's being made, you have to also understand that the intention that was put into that space.
Mm-hmm.
Because the labyrinth is all about spiritual growth and all about your journey and all about not stress and love. And you've got all of that intention in the making of that labyrinth. So that's going to come through as well to you, from that energy that's just now in that place from the intention of when it was being built.
Right. Of course, you have all the energy and intentions of the people that have walked before you into that labyrinth as well.
Yes, because that creates a lot of energy, and it's fun. We were talking about when we were discussing vortexes. What makes someone drawn to put a labyrinth where they put it?
Mm-hmm.
Could it be where they're sensing the ley lines, sensing a vortex, and putting the labyrinth in that location because of that? It's just a lot to think about.
Right.
Because it's like, why did you put the labyrinth there? And they're not small.
Well, some are small.
So, well, I mean, it's got to be big enough for you to move around in. So it's not going to be like a 12-foot by 12-foot. You know what I'm saying?
Well, it could be, because there are very simple labyrinths that you can make yourself just in your yard. You can even make it with leaves.
No, but I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about labyrinths that are already created. People that go out, like you have a labyrinth finder that you came across.
Yes.
Like the one you found in Otto, North Carolina. It's a good sized labyrinth.
Mm-hmm.
It's not the size of a football field, but it's a good size. And and that one's a simple spiral. Why did they put it there? Why did they put a labyrinth? Why make a labyrinth? You know what I'm saying? It's kind of like, what draws someone to create a labyrinth? I mean, like you're saying, you could be any size in your yard if you've got a yard. But the point of the labyrinth is for growth. I mean, are you going to put one in your yard? Because you've got a lot of yard.
I do, but I hadn't thought about it.
Yeah, because you're not drawn to do it.
Right.
It's kind of like Field of Dreams. If you build it, they will come. If you put a labyrinth in your yard, are you now going to be on the locator and people are going to come to your yard now want to walk this labyrinth?
Mm-hmm.
Which would be cool. It's just kind of what makes, because we talked about the history of the labyrinth.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know why I'm going on this tirade about it. It's just happening. So I guess Spirit wants me to do it. But what causes you to want to create a labyrinth? Because you've got to design it. There's intention. There's some material, but people have done this.
Mm-hmm.
So are they drawn to do it for themselves, for their own spiritual journey? Because that's a spiritual journey just in getting it going. Figure out the design, the material, how's it going to look. Spirit would be guiding you all that way. I mean, that would be kind of cool.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then figure out where it's going to be. So the people have gone before and have created these wonderful labyrinths. You have to wonder what were they thinking?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, but beyond the old ones where it's such a wonderful journey that you could do quietly out in nature And why wouldn't it be a perfect place to meditate? It just seems it's just the thought process behind making one
Hmm.
just floors me, I guess,
Right.
because you know you talk about sacred geometry. You're really going to be needing that geometry in creating a labyrinth.
Yeah. Well, I know that back in ancient times when they built theirs, some of it was built as a protective means to keep either unwanted visitors out or people that were going to try to invade your, I don't want to say castle, but the in ancient Egypt, their palace, I guess you could say. So they built those complexes, those labyrinths around their entire palace so that anyone trying to get
Now that's more the maze one, correct?
it could be either one. I'm pretty sure they may have been talking about the maze in some of these ancient ones because they were getting them stuck. But if you're in your palace and you're looking out and you see someone that's making their way through this very extremely elaborate labyrinth that is goes all the way around your castle, because you could be getting close to what you think is the center or the where you want to be because the palace is the center, but then the path takes you right back out to the outer edges and brings you back in and back to the outer edges. So you could be watching and seeing that there's somebody there in that labyrinth that you don't want to have contact with. And that allows you to get your soldiers or whatever to protect your palace. But they also believed that by creating these labyrinths or mazes, it was to confuse evil spirits, which I thought was interesting.
That is interesting.
Back in
Just
those days,
well,
that's
but
why
why
they.
would the spirits use the labyrinth? Why would the spirits use the labyrinth?
Why would a minotaur
Okay,
get stuck in a labyrinth and not just tear it down as he goes? you know?
that's true. Good point.
So anyway, that's what the ancients, when they built them, that was their intent. But now what the intent is, that would be interesting to know. Yes, what prompted you to do this? What guided you? What's the thought process here?
I was in my head. This is now going like my mind's now calculating. How would this? That'd make a beautiful garden, a labyrinth. Because if you did it right with shrubbery and plants and stuff, you can't see where it's going.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? That would make a killer garden.
Yeah, yes, it
Just
would.
yeah, that would take a whole lot of work. I'm going, oh, that'd be a really pretty garden. You know?
My thumb is not green enough for that, so don't plant that in my yard.
Okay, I will. So that suggestion just fell
Yeah.
very hard to the ground. Okay, never mind.
Anyway, yeah, I did find a labyrinth locator that it was really interesting. It has over 6,000 labyrinths in their database for the entire world. Found one near me.
Wow.
Yeah, that was maybe about three near me, if
Now,
I remember correctly, whenever I did the search on that.
where are they at? The ones near you?
The one that is definitely outside is in Highland near a rec center, and they built it there. Whenever they built this rec center, they built like the tennis courts and playgrounds and different things, and they have a garden there, and they have a labyrinth that they built there. So whenever I go help set up
Okay.
for that fireworks show, I may be walking that labyrinth.
Yeah.
We'll see. No promises, but
Where's the other two at?
I think there's one in Godfrey maybe that's in a church, and I can't remember where the third one is, but they were also inside a church. This locator tells you if they're indoor, outdoor, if they're permanent, or if they're mobile. There's some that are mobile that they take to different places so people can experience these.
Wow.
Yeah, yeah. Well, with the mindset that you are being mindful and you're meditating and it lowers anxiety and brings clarity to a person, a lot of assisted living facilities and rehabilitation facilities are now having, if they haven't already built a labyrinth on their property, they have mobile ones that they can bring and set up in the yard of the facility or park or whatever, so that the residents and the people that are in rehab, physical rehabilitation and such, they can go there and utilize that meditative and mindful walk through the labyrinth. And I thought that was just wonderful.
It is. I hadn't even contemplated that they could be mobile.
Yeah.
I'm like, whoa, okay. It's that's pretty interesting. A lot of people have never been to a labyrinth, which I thought was, since I'd been to one, but I'd never been to one before that. But that was while I was working on a particular part of my journey when I came across that. So I figured or entertained the thought that Spirit did that on purpose, obviously.
Yeah.
And I'd gone to the labyrinth. I walked it once, and it was very interesting.
Yeah, yeah. In Italy, I'm pretty sure we went through some of those in all of the countless El Duomos, the domed churches that we went to in Italy, where I can't even tell you how many we went to, but I'm pretty sure there were some in there. Because a lot of, even a lot of Catholic churches, that's the big pattern. The floor on the of the church usually could, well, I shouldn't say usually. They have a labyrinth there in the tiles on the floor of the church, but you may not see that at eye level. You may have to go upstairs to look down upon them to actually see that it's a labyrinth, unless they have a
Yeah.
sign on it saying here's the start to our labyrinth. But I don't know that the churches do that. But
No.
if you are a member of that congregation, you may know that that's a labyrinth there, and that's why it's an open area of tile flooring. So it'd be something interesting to see if one goes into a church. But the finder tells you if it's in a church or not, and if it's open to the public. If it's open year round or seasonal, it's a really good app. It's not really an app. I found it online on a website using my computer, so using a web browser. That's how I
Are you
found
gonna
it.
can you put the link
Oh, I
on
will.
the Facebook page?
Yeah,
Yes. Perfect.
yeah. I'll be putting it everywhere on the episode as well, on wherever you listen to the podcast. So look for it there as well if you can't find it on Facebook. So anyway, one thing I did find that it's always amazing to me when we cover things, and I know everybody gets tired of hearing this. I can just feel it, hear it, say it, whatever. It's amazing how whenever we do research on something that I get to go back to my past and say, wow, this explains why I liked this so much as a kid, or even as a younger adult, not realizing that's what it was. I found a website here that gives you 3 ways to make your own labyrinth. And I've been dealing with labyrinths all my life and not really realizing that that's what I'm doing. And also mazes, because I always love the puzzle mazes that you have the blocks and you have to turn around, go back the other way when you're drawing it with your pencil, when you're following the pattern with your pencil to get from one end to the out to the other. All right.
Mm-hmm.
But I can remember as a child drawing, well, now they're labyrinths, now that I know what they are, that I was drawing labyrinths and I was always following them with my finger, going around the pattern to go to the center and then come right back out using my finger, coming all the way out my maze, back out again. And I would do that during class. And it just kind of relaxed me, because sometimes in class I had some anxiety going on, some thoughts of, judgmental thoughts, ego was there and everything. And the doing those little patterns and stuff and following them with my finger to the center and back out always calmed me down. And that just makes sense now.
Now, are you sure you don't want one in your yard? Because it sounds like you like them.
Yeah, I mean, it relaxes me. So whenever I found this article showed 3 ways, and the first one was drawing the labyrinths, and I was like, oh my gosh, I used to do that all the time as a kid. So
Well, you have to wonder how many of our listeners have done that as a kid.
right, yeah, Have you?
No, but I always liked doing the puzzles that were I didn't draw them myself, but I always liked to do the puzzles. But I started in the middle and worked my way out. I didn't start on the out and work my way in.
I'd start at the exit and work my way to the front on the actual mazes.
Yeah, like
You know?
yeah, I would start in the middle where you're supposed to end up,
Yeah.
and I could easily because it was easier for me to find my way out that way.
Right. Right.
So I don't think my experience was the same as your experience.
Well,
'Cause-
it'd be interesting to hear what everybody else's experiences are with them if they've had them.
yeah, absolutely.
A second way is you can make a spiral labyrinth, and that's the ones that aren't very big. You can make them in your yard. They don't have to be large. And it's like I mentioned earlier about when you rake your leaves, you can make a labyrinth out of your leaves that you've raked in your yard and then walk your labyrinth and do some meditation when you get into center and walk your way back out. And
And then rake them up.
and rake them up. Exactly.
And then rake them up when you're done.
Because they'll get blown away anyway, probably. So, and another way that you could make your own labyrinth, and this one I think would probably work well in cities and or just a regular neighborhood, is that you walk a path in your neighborhood where you have to do turn left at this corner and you go straight and you turn right at this corner and you just do multiple changes like that, and you take that to a place where you can that's peaceful for you, a peaceful destination. It could be at a park, at a stream or a fountain. It could be a park at a gazebo or something like that, or just a flower garden that's in a park or something along those lines. And do your meditating on your way there, and then you meditate when you get there to try to, well, to connect with spirit and get your answers to whatever it is you're trying to get an answer to, and then do the same path on the way back to your house. So those are three simple ways that you can actually make your own when you're needing to or wanting or being drawn to have that experience with a labyrinth.
Very cool.
Carrie, what else did you find about labyrinths?
Well, I found interesting, when we were, because we like to research different angles and try to come up with something that's valid information, you know. But I came across the spiritual meaning of seeing a labyrinth in your dreams.
Oh,
And we've touched upon spirit meaning in dreams in the past, and I thought, well, that kind of ties a lot of things in together here. So I thought, well, let's go over what that means if you see a labyrinth in your dream,
okay.
because that's something I never thought. I've never dreamed of one. Now that we've talked about it, that might happen just because it's come up into conversation. But if you have dreamed of a labyrinth in your dream, it can show different things, obviously. One of them is the beginning of a journey.
Mm-hmm.
That could mean a start of a new project, a new season, a new phase of your life. It's obviously something to be excited and hopeful for, because the reason of seeing the labyrinths tells you that new beginnings might be exciting, but the journey is not always going to be smooth. But that's how we learn. I mean, a lot of journeys could be a little bumpy, but get you where you need to be, and you learn your life lessons as you go. It comes to prepare you for what lies ahead. So if you had a dream of a labyrinth, it shows you there's hope, positive vibes, there's change coming. Not all change is bad, it's going to be good. It also, and a dream can help prepare your mental health for challenges if you don't take change well. It's a new season or a new project that you're about ready to embark on. When you see a labyrinth in real life, it can indicate that something unusual is about to happen to your life. When something unusual is about to happen to you, the universe can use rare animals, objects, and sounds to depict this. So seeing a labyrinth in real life can tell you to prepare for surprises, and this can help ease your mind of changes. You're letting you know changes are coming. But it's also going to encourage you for real life to never allow people to manipulate you, because the labyrinth is made in real life, was made by people, and therefore you need to understand that people can manipulate you through their design and wits, which I thought that was very interesting, because as empaths, people try to manipulate you all the time
Mm-hmm.
and are sometimes successful because of your empath feelings.
True.
You want to help the person, you want to, you know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So it's also could be a way to prepare to protect yourself against people who try to manipulate. And in real life, it could be a strong mind. It can encourage you to protect your conviction. It could be telling you to pay attention to what's going on in your mind. Because, like we've talked about before with mindfulness and what you were talking about in karma, the loss of karma, what you put out is what you get back. So the labyrinth might be giving you a little nudge on you need to, do a checkup from the neck up, so to speak. What's going on in your mind? What are you sitting out there?
Mm-hmm. Makes sense.
A lot of times it could also mean that you need direction, because a labyrinth is confusing in paths that can require redirection, like we we're talking about with the maze, and therefore be eager to seek direction from the universe or spirit when you come across things that are confusing. So you want to definitely pray for direction or meditate on the situation on what you're to do next. And also, it wants you to trust your inward intuition. You could stand in front of a labyrinth in a dream as a test, like set that intention that I want to dream of a labyrinth. Ask for directions while you're in this labyrinth. Ask for ways to go. Hear the messages that are coming through. And that can help with your connecting with your intuition and help with your psychic ability. Because I mean, how much time? I mean, when I get a reading, when I do a reading, I get the voice talking to me. The inner voice talks to me. When I'm trying to, not do a reading, but I'm trying to do something psychically, I get the answers. I ask a question to get the answers. Sometimes I get the answers while I'm still asking the question, but I get a very definite. I hear the voice answer yes or no, or what are different things. Is that how it works for you, Kim?
Yeah, I would say it does. I do get flashes though of images.
Yeah, yeah. Your clairvoyance kicks in too.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if you set the intention before sleep that you wanted to dream of a labyrinth and you wanted to, the intention was to make your way through the labyrinth by listening to the inner voice. And even though it's a dream exercise, it's going to help you rely on that inner voice, recognize that inner voice, and listen to that inner voice more in your daytime, you know,
Mm-hmm. Right.
during the day. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that does make sense. Yeah.
Yeah. And when you're doing the dream exercise, as you work through it, you can do it several times, several different nights. It also helps attune your sense of judgment. You build confidence, and that's something that you're not going to get it perfect, obviously, because ego likes to pop in, but your sense of judgment helps with trusting your psychic abilities.
Okay, so the judgment is not you judging yourself on what you're doing, but your
No,
judgment of,
where you're going on this path.
yeah, do I take this turn or
Yeah,
that turn? And
yeah,
taking that
yes. So
judge. Because it could have
yeah,
two
yeah. So
meanings,
the
you know.
voice is yes, yeah, no. Well, you should never be judging yourself.
Well, I know.
You should never be doing that. So don't take that out of the mix. That's no. But like, okay, you listen to the voice. Now you're going the direction of the voice, and you're finding your way to the middle. Now you have an accurate sense of judgment because you did it. You listened and you did it.
Mm-hmm.
So that builds confidence in that sense of judgment. Whereas you being an accurate sense of judgment, you're going to trust your hits a little bit more when you get a psychic hit. It's just being a sense of judgment on your accuracy, not negative. It's just you're getting more confident.
Makes sense. Yeah.
And that particular dream, if you're trusting your sense of judgment in the labyrinth, that's giving you affirmation that you have a strong perceptive ability and that you can take the right actions even under pressure.
Hmm.
Because you're going to be more in tune to listen to that and get that gut instinct. And that's going to be more of working with your gut, you listen to the voice, now you're going with your gut on which direction you need to go. So it's kind of, you're working your different psychic muscles,
Mm-hmm.
Going through this process. Now, one of the scenarios I came across was that you're running out of time. And, this was basically saying there's a time for everything. There's times and seasons. People don't know this truth, that find themselves falling victim to delays and failures, but to teach that your spiritual truth. You will dream of running through a labyrinth. That dream is telling you to hasten up. So if you're dreaming that you're running through a labyrinth, then you have spent too much time trying to accomplish a task that you need to just hurry up. You're missing an opportunity, or you're going to miss the opportunity if you don't quickly get things done. Take advantage of time. Does that make sense?
Yes, that is interesting. Because as I'm sitting
Did that
here,
hit a nerve?
yes, maybe.
Oh, okay. Yay.
Because as I think about the dreams that I have, and we know they're a little bizarre sometimes, but after doing this research and knowing that in ancient times they made labyrinths out of their palaces as well, not just the gardens outside, but the rooms inside. The dreams that I have where I am running through these different things to get to a certain place, I'm wondering if I'm actually dreaming of a complex type labyrinth that is actually an
You
office
could be.
building, out of an office building instead of a
Yes.
actual labyrinth.
And you've had dreams where you're going through warehouses or buildings and there's a slide you go down.
Yes.
That could be part of a labyrinth.
Right,
Take
right.
you to a different level. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. Huh. Interesting. Very
yeah.
interesting.
Yes. Now, if you dream that you fall into a labyrinth while running, that's a sign of patience.
Okay, I need an explanation of that one. Go ahead. Sorry. That would be me just being clumsy. So, patience, huh?
Well,
Okay.
the context of it is you need to be patient. If you dream you're falling while running in a labyrinth, it's telling you to be patient. Don't rush things. You need to deliberately pay attention to the message, because it might be that you're just feeling you're being left behind by other people and you're not staying focused on the path.
Oh, yeah. Okay. I could see that then. Yeah. Mhm.
Okay. Okay. Now, when you see a labyrinth, you could be distracted by the enormity and complexity of the structure. So rather than get distracted by the structure, focus on the destination, because this is a spiritual message for you. So if you're overwhelmed by the size of the labyrinth and everything, you're basically being told you're distracted. You're not focusing in life. Spiritual world is encouraging to stay focused on your goal. You're not focusing on the goal. And rather, you're standing on the wayside, and maybe you need to get involved so you can make progress.
Yeah, I could see that.
But if you're not paying attention and you're not focused, you're going to stand on the wayside.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Another meaning is of seeing a labyrinth in your dream could be trying to tell you that you need to embrace your spirituality and that you need to focus on your spiritual journey and patiently go through the spiritual tests and trials that you have to face on the journey. A lot of people, especially today's age, we want to Google it, learn it, be done with it, and we got it.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you don't learn anything going through that. So, to get to the middle of the labyrinth in your dream, you need foresight and intuition powers. So that requires spiritual sensitivity. So when you dream of the labyrinth, it tells you to stay spiritually active. Without seeing a labyrinth, meditation on it also brings about spiritual sensitivity to increase your energy, vibration, and frequency and align you with the spiritual world. The labyrinth is an omen of spirituality. So you have been on a spiritual journey, correct?
Mm-hmm. Right.
And a lot of your journey, how many dreams now, looking back, were labyrinths?
Oh, I've had a few.
Yeah. So I mean, and Kim came up with the topic of labyrinths, so I think we all know why. You know, Spirit's really trying to, show you how these labyrinths have been in your life for a long time.
Yeah, that they have.
And yeah, and also if you dream of walking through a labyrinth, you're on a journey of self-discovery.
Yeah.
So in the spiritual world, that indicates that you need to discover who you are. You have allowed other people's judgments about you to criticize you in your mind.
Mm-hmm.
And that happens to all of us, you know. And on that self journey, especially when you're trying to do the spiritual journey or the psychic journey, this is telling you it's time to release all the vague external opinions. The dream tells you to go to a personal self discovery retreat, understanding who you are and the potential you have fueled your confidence, get your self esteem where it's supposed to be, strong conviction. Now, in Christianity, seeing a labyrinth is a sign of Jesus.
Mm.
So, the definition of the labyrinths, it is a maze like structure that we talked about with a singular path in it. And this means you need to walk straight till you get to the middle. And so, that would be for the Christian portion of dreaming of a labyrinth.
Right. More like a simple meandering one.
Yeah. I also found labyrinth tattoo.
Oh, okay.
Okay. Which I'm like, well, while we're here, I might as well. I'm not. Okay. Kim doesn't have tattoos. Carrie does. Okay. So, but one thing we have all, Kim and I have come across in our growth and everything is, even though she doesn't have a tattoo and I do, you have to be careful what you put on your body.
Definitely.
You have to understand or recognize the symbol and what it means spiritually before you put it on your body. Okay. So
Hmm.
if you have a labyrinth tattoo, the following spiritual meaning could be embedded in it. One, you will go through confusing times. That makes sense,
Yes, that does.
but embrace the wisdom of the universe to know what to do. Furthermore, be strong enough to withstand the pressure that comes from such moments. Depend on your spiritual guides at all times, and it can help with your creativity. When you get a labyrinth tattoo, you will become more creative and the creative energy that a labyrinth emits. Thought that was interesting. I'm not getting a labyrinth tattoo, but I just thought that was interesting and I throw that out there.
Yeah, very interesting. Yeah.
Uh, I had a conversation with a young lady she asked me a question. She had gotten a tattoo based off of a show her and her ex-boyfriend used to watch, and it was an old sacred symbol from the Norse religion.
Okay.
And she felt that a lot of stuff that was bad happened after this symbol was tattooed onto her. And I'm like, I'm not familiar enough with the symbols of that particular belief system that I couldn't tell her what it meant. I said, well, did you research it? Just because you saw it on TV may not be an actual what they say it is on TV. That's a big joke about, a lot of people get the Asian symbols, tattooed on.
Right.
And it's like, unless I have someone there who can read it and tell me that's what it is, I'm thinking it's soy sauce. Only because I don't know what it says.
And you trust to tell you the correct
Right,
definition of it.
right.
Yeah.
Someone who actually knows the language. So I highly recommend before you put any symbol or anything from a belief system on your body as a tattoo, which I know this is not the episode for tattoos, but I'm just saying, research it.
Hmm.
Research the dickens out of it, because spiritual meaning can bring about a lot in a tattoo.
Yeah.
And this is something that you're putting on your body. Now, how she fixed her situation was she put a Band-Aid over it. She set the intention of when she got the new tattoo, which is a Band-Aid to cover that symbol, that she set the intention of breaking the bonds with that tattoo and covering up with the Band-Aid.
Interesting.
Yes, and it seems to have worked.
Well, that's good.
But, it's just you do need to be mindful of, what you do put on your body.
Yeah.
And it's the same as wearing certain symbols too, whether not just a tattoo, but wearing certain symbols. Certain energies are attached to certain symbols.
Hmm.
I just thought it was interesting because I never would have thought to get a Labyrinths tattoo. And I'm like, oh, that's interesting. I got to throw that out there. Kim may not have found it interesting because she doesn't have any tattoos. But I found it interesting.
But thinking back, I have seen a labyrinth tattoo before on somebody.
Okay.
It wasn't big because, well, anyway, I remember seeing a tattoo on somebody that was a labyrinth. Now that I think about it, no, that's what it is. So now what I am going to try to do is to get images of what a serpentine, a spiral, a simple meander, and a complex meander labyrinth, an image for each of those, because that's the different types of actual labyrinths that are out there. I'm not going to put any of the mazes out there because I think that's kind of self-explanatory.
Oh, too many.
Yeah, and way too many, you know.
Yeah, I agree. I agree.
Yeah, but I'm going to try to put all those out there on
Yeah.
our Facebook so that it makes sense whenever we mention the serpentine or the spiral, because I know we've mentioned both of those, I believe. And then there's the simple meander and a complex meander. Now, the complex meander is one that is huge and that has all kinds of pathways in it that you follow just to get to that gorgeous center and then work your way back out. So, and like Carrie said, the labyrinths are one way in, one way out. The same path you went in is the path you come out. There's only one way of each, and the mazes is where you can start here, go all the way through it, go to the center, and then you have to find your way back out another end. Or it could be you have to find your way back out to the front the way you came, but different pathway.
So that locator you found, does it show pictures of the labyrinths?
Yes, it shows.
Like a Google map?
Yes, like a Google
Okay.
map. When you find, you'll search it by country, you could search it by city, state, township, wherever the province you might live in the different areas. And when you do the search for it, you pull it up, it gives you some information about it, how long it takes to get through it, depending on, how fast you walk. Really depends on how long it takes you. Whether it gives you phone number, contact information for that labyrinth. There may even be a website that you can click on to get more information on it. Tells you if it's medieval or not, if it's a replica, if it's open to the public, outdoors, indoors, what it's made of, whether it's a rock
That's
or
kind of
garden.
cool.
Yeah, there's many different, whether it's wheelchair accessible, roughly the diameter size of it, and when it may have been installed, the date it was installed, if they know. They may not know because they are so old.
Right.
And it tells you if there's any times you have to schedule, the scheduled times that it's open and stuff like that. It's really interesting. Like I said, you can click on it, and I'm looking at one right now that's in Hawaii because that was just the first one that popped up. But it's really interesting because they're all overhead views, more or less, because that's really the only way you can see them fully is by the overhead views.
Well, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, because
if you had a side view, you'd be going, I don't see a labyrinth there.
Yeah. But this one is definitely rocks. It was made with rocks bordering the pathway that you follow. So it's really interesting. A lot of information on it.
Sounds like it.
Yeah.
So in Halloween, when you go to these farms and they've got the mazes, they actually made
Yes.
the labyrinth.
Well,
but not with the same intention. Not with the same intention.
They're making mazes mostly.
Yeah.
But there are the ones that make labyrinths where you actually just go to the center and then you work your way back out the same pathway. That's the easiest thing they could do, really, with the corn mazes. I mean, you really don't want your people, patrons getting lost, You have to get a search party out for them,
I don't know if it's a haunted maze, they might. I don't know.
Oh, that's true. But anyway, that's what they do. That's what those corn mazes are. They're actually labyrinths. So that's pretty interesting.
Yeah.
I really resonated with this.
Very interesting.
Yeah, I was moved by this one. Not moved, but inspired.
I could see spirits were trying to tell you about labyrinths for some time now, Kim. So that's cool. Well, see, this is how it works though. When Spirit's trying to show you something and you're not getting the nudge, and then you get this topic, because I mean, sometimes it's all of a sudden one of us will go, "Hey, let's do this topic," and like, "Oh, okay," and then we get into researching, like, "Oh, that's why that topic came up."
Yeah.
It hits home,
Yes.
and hopefully it hits home with our listeners as well, because it hits home for different reasons.
Yeah.
How it hits me is going to hit you differently, or vice versa. But you've definitely had some labyrinth dreams.
I have. I have. And
Yeah, that's interesting.
yeah, and I've also made a connection with my crocheting and making labyrinths, because some of the crocheting that I do, I start at the center and I work my way out, going around and around and around. So it's just making a
Hmm.
labyrinth as I go, and it's like, no wonder that is so calming for me when I'm crocheting.
Yep,
So,
it's all coming together.
yes.
Ah, yay!
Yeah.
All right. Well, Kim, do you have anything else to add to this episode of Labyrinths?
No, I think that's all I am drawn to talk about.
Okay, so we may have a sidebar conversation later.
Maybe someday we will have another conversation about it. So,
Oh, someday. Okay, that seems very far off.
yeah, someday could be tomorrow.
Well, Kim, I think we have done all we can do for Labyrinths. What about you?
Yeah, I agree with that. Yep.
Hopefully, listeners, you enjoyed this episode of Psychic Bet. Please reach out to us with any questions or thoughts you have of this episode, and we will see you next Monday. Bye.
Bye. May your light shine bright.
Thank you so much for listening to our podcast, Psychic Bent. If you enjoyed Psychic Bent, please like, follow, rate, review, and subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. We can be reached on Facebook at Psychic Bent Podcast. Our email address is psychicbent1@gmail.com. May your light shine bright.